wonderful to see a packed house, and we have some people that are watching us at the community center and at the high schools. So we have a fantastic audience, and you're in for a wonderful presentation. I would just like to remind you again to turn your phones off and to wait until after the presentation. We'll have an opportunity for photos. You can take some photos and get some good photos after the presentation. We are recognizing Constitution Day today. This is our first presentation of a couple of different events that we're going to have for Constitution Day. I hope at least most of you were able to pick up a pocket Constitution that we had out there on the table. We ran out at an event yesterday in Somerset, and that's great that we're able to get those out to you, but we're limited on how many of those we can get from Frankfurt. So I hope that at least most of you were able to get that. I would like for you to put on your calendar, if you would, Thursday, September 24th, we are going to have another presentation here for Constitution Day. It will be 5:30 in the evening. Melinda, in this room, several of the professors from Somerset Community College will be putting together a presentation on constitutional concepts and the Bill of Rights, and that's open to everyone. We encourage you to attend. We are going to have refreshments afterwards, so we hope that you stick around for a meet and greet and grab some refreshments out in the hallway after the presentation. At this time, I would like to introduce one of our students here at Somerset Community College, the London campus. Brian Overby is from London. Brian served 2 tours in Iraq, serving in the Marines. He is a Somerset Community College student studying criminal justice here on the Laurel campus. Brian is going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I would ask if you would stand, please, and face the flag.
The United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Brian. Please welcome to the podium Dr. Joe Marshall, the President and CEO of Somerset Community College. Dr. Marshall.
Thank you, John, and it's wonderful to see everyone here. I so wish that we had the chairs for you to sit in and the space to make you feel comfortable. But I'll tell you what, I think you will find, as I did, actually the first time, or the time that I heard our speaker today, I stood because there just wasn't room, and I didn't find myself getting too tired because she was very, very wonderful. And I think that you will feel the same way, but I do understand if you need to take a break. So I really thank you for coming. You know, it is seldom that we get to stand before history in person. We hear about it as something that happened to dead people. Well, today we have a rare opportunity as we welcome the Holocaust survivor, Inge Auerbacher, to Somerset Community College, our Laurel campus, as part of our 50th anniversary speaker series. We also welcome our students who are watching by teleconference in Pulaski, or at Somerset and Southwestern High School in Pulaski County. When Inge was 3, she saw her father and grandfather taken from their homes during what has come to be known as Crystal Night, or the Night of the Broken Glass. Then her mother, her grandmother, and she were able to hide, and weren't taken. But very soon, her father was released, and then she, with the rest of her family, were taken again with her father to go to a concentration camp. There were, to let you know how serious this is and how serious it was, in her camp, 140,000 people were sent to her camp. But of those, 88 were sent to the gas chambers in Auschwitz, and 35,000 died of malnutrition and disease. Inge and her parents are among the 1% that survived those terrible years that she spent in that camp. It's impossible for us to imagine what she endured during that time, all for one reason. She was Jewish, and her people, the Jewish people, were hated by Adolf Hitler's Nazi regime and its collaborators. She will share with you the horrible numbers of people who met their death through his hatred. But through her tragedy, you will find that she has found hope and purpose. She and her family immigrated to the U.S. in 1946. She became a chemist and is the author today of 6 books, and we have 2 of them with her today that she is willing to sign for you, and if you wish to purchase the book. She has received quite a number of awards in recognition for her endurance and for her overcoming the horrible situation that she was in and her contribution since that time. These books are published in 9 languages. She holds an honorary doctorate of Humane Letters from Long Island University. She has received the Ellis Island Medal of Honor, and 2 other recipients of that distinguished award were John Glenn and Hillary Clinton. She received the Louis B. Yavner Award from the Board of Regents, New York State. 3 major awards came from Germany, one from the President of Germany. She was made, she said this was her most proudest moment and one of the awards she treasures the most. She's an honorary member of the Blackfeet Nation of Montana. She now travels the world telling her story. She's in much demand, and we're very fortunate to have her. Inge, I'm so glad I met you that night, and I'm so glad you found me later. So that was, she says I left her there. Please join me in welcoming what I would consider a national treasure to Somerset Community College, our Laurel campus.
I bring you all regards from the Big Apple, New York City, where I now live. Now, there's so many people here I should thank, so I will just say thank you, everybody here, for bringing me here, and I feel your love, your Southern love. I'm sort of a Southern girl, too, Southern Germany, so my dialect is sort of similar, except it's Swabian, so it's a little bit similar to yours, except that it's German. Now, I will speak to you today about a period of time, an awful period of time, that we'd rather forget, but we cannot. A period of time between 1938 and 1945, which is now called the Holocaust. What do we mean by that term? It means complete destruction by fire, a time when 11 million innocent people were killed. Perhaps a better name would be slaughtered. Who were those people? 6 million were Jews. Hitler had a special hatred against the Jewish people. He said we were a race. Well, we're not. We are a religion. There are black Jews, Chinese Jews, Indian Jews. If you want to become Jews, join the tribe. And of course, who was the most famous Jew of all time? We know, Jesus, right? He prayed the same way that I prayed. And among those 6 million were 1.5 million children. And those 3 million children's eyes still haunt me, because their story was mine, and mine was theirs. And I feel a special mission to keep their memory alive, because we must. But who were the 5 million others? They were Jehovah's Witnesses, gypsies, people with physical and mental difficulties, some clergy, people with different sexual orientation, some Poles, anybody who was against Hitler was supposed to be killed. And so we really have to remember all those people, because all of them had the right to live, all of them. My last book was written, for instance, with a Polish Catholic girl. She was in labor camps. So they also had their problems. Now, I would like to take you on a journey of my first 10 years mostly before and during the Holocaust, and even I will go a little bit after. It's very important. How do you get out of such a thing? I know you're sitting here. This happened so many years ago, over 70. It's a very important year this year. You saw a lot about the liberation of Auschwitz, 1945. We will liberate even later, quite a few months later. It's important to remember, because had Hitler succeeded, many of you would not be sitting here. Who would be the next group to go? Who knows? Maybe black people, maybe people with red hair, with golden hair, whatever. Or another racial or religious sect. You would not be here, for sure. Because it was not only Europe that he would wanted to conquer, America too. And perhaps the whole world. Thank God he was not capable. Now let us pack our bags and go on a journey of my life. Clicker, please. Thank you. And I have to give you a name. You are helping me.
John.
Okay, John is going to help. Oh, all right, quicker. That's fine too. I was born on December 31, 1934. I know you're taking out your computers and how old is she? Because nobody does anything in the head anymore. You gotta have a computer. I just got my first iPhone. So, you know, you gotta have a computer, a cell phone, a smartphone. And I'm 80 years young. And I feel still like 20. But who knows what will be, but I'm still young. I'm a young 80. Anyway, in the little village of Kippenheim in southwestern Germany, very close to the French and Swiss border, village of about 2,000 people, 60 Jewish families. We lived happily together, wall to wall, house to house, and I was the last Jewish child born in that village. Next. My family lived in that village for at least 200 years. This is the house we owned for more than 100 years. My father was born in, probably my grandfather, and it's still standing. It's over 200 years old. And when you look over here, those two windows, that was my parents' bedroom. In that room I was born. And there was no hospital. And we had only one doctor. And guess what? He wasn't Jewish. You know, you have this cliche, all doctors are Jewish. Not only was he not Jewish, he already belonged to the Nazi party. My mother was sick for 9 months. I gave her plenty of trouble. And he came many times to the house wearing his Nazi uniform. So in a way, I was given life by a Nazi doctor. But he really was kind of special in those days. He took still very, very good care of his Jewish patients. Later on, he did some terrible things, probably the euthanasia program to kill people with physical, mental difficulties, and he was put in jail for many years. But to me, I cannot say one bad word about him, and the other Jewish people in the village, neither. Next. My father was a textile merchant. We were not millionaires, we were comfortable. The house was very large. And he already had a car. I was an only child, by the way. And when he came courting my mom, it was so special to have a car. The doctor had a car, maybe one or two other people, and my daddy. So when he proposed, my mother said, of course I'll marry you, so she could show off to her girlfriend, I have a boat with a car. So here was the famous car. Next. My father was a soldier in World War I. He was wounded quite badly and received the Iron Cross, which is equal to your Purple Heart. I mean, he would have come up from the grave if he knew that the President of Germany would give me the Presidential Medal, the cross, and he got the Iron Cross quite a few years in between the two crosses. My great-grandmother had 14 children. She had 4 sons in World War I. 4. 2 died for Germany. We were very patriotic Germans. We loved our country. I can trace my family back to around 1625. Actually, Jews lived in Germany for close to 2,000 years. Right after Jesus, they came already as merchants from the Middle East and settled there. They were expelled, came back, so forth. Next. Here I am in my sandbox, thinking already, doing some very important experiments. I would become a chemist. Those were my first experiments in the sandbox, making wonderful mud pies. They didn't win the Nobel Prize. Next. The time is changing here. It is close to 1938 here. We are still happy. Excursion to the Black Forest, which was very nearby. I consider it one of the most beautiful areas of Germany. Come and visit it. It's really worthwhile. And I'm wearing the traditional German dress, the dirndl dress, the peasant dress. And my parents gave me a very German name, Inge. Now, when I go to Germany now, I go quite often. I speak in many schools. My German is excellent still. We kept it up at home. And I asked the students, I'm sure you had some grandmothers whose name was Inge. So all the hands go up. It was a very, very famous name. Next. Here I am in front of a little tower. Had a special meaning. In the house where I was born, there was a plaque that a famous tailor was born in the same house. This tailor went to England and he was taken in by a German tailor shop that became the most famous tailor shop in London. They made all those uniforms, they made those black bear hats. He became very rich, came back to Kippenheim, my village, and became a philanthropist. He gave money to the poor. He opened up an orphanage in the Black Forest, still there, but it's no longer an orphanage, it's a school. When his name day came, all the people got rolls and bread. And he also did some flood relief. I mean, he was a very good person. He became the hero of the village. And to honor him, they put a plaque on the house, and this is the birthhouse of Georg Stulz von Ottenberg. He was knighted. And today, there is a plaque right next to him that I was also born in this house. So I feel very good because the house has good karma, very good karma. Next. The time is the 1938, when this peaceful situation changed completely. My grandparents lived about 200 miles away. They came to see us quite frequently. We went there too. And you can see my grandfather is wearing his head covered. Orthodox Jews, the men, should have their head covered. Now, I know Christians take off their hat to honor God. We do the opposite, except the Pope. And we are waiting his coming now to New York. Everybody's excited. And also, the cardinals have this yarmulke, this skull cap. So I came from an Orthodox family, modern Orthodox. And here's my grandmother, who unfortunately did not survive the war, my parents. Something very special. My doll. My grandmother gave me a doll at age 2. And I gave her the name Marlene for the picture that I saw my mother's album of movie stars. She loved movie stars, and there was Marlene Dietrich. I know you don't know her, but Britney Spears, you know. She was sort of much more famous, much more intelligent, blonde hair, blue eyes. And so I said, Mommy, who's that? My doll had blonde hair and blue eyes. That's Marlene Dietrich, so it was Marlene. But I found out later, I spoke in Germany, and one of the teachers said, this was a famous doll. She was made for the 1936 Olympics, the Hitler Olympics in Berlin. And her name was Inge. Can you imagine? Never knew that the only grandchild my grandmother had was an Inge. She gives her the Inge doll, of course. There was a Barbara and Erica, but she gave me the Inge doll, and she's now in the Holocaust Museum in Washington. I gave it to them. Thanks. And that's the only object that survived my years of incarceration, and I brought it to America. We had a beautiful synagogue. Our churches are called synagogues. And everything changed on November 9th and 10th, the first major riot against the Jewish people in Austria and in Germany, where all the synagogues either were burned to the ground or desecrated very badly. All the men from the age of 16 on, in other words, boys and men, were sent to concentration camps. In our area, it was Dachau. Other areas, Buchenwald. Dachau was the first concentration camp in Germany. Next. Here's what it looked like inside. Beautiful chandeliers. And in the Jewish faith, you have a rabbi and a cantor. Now, the cantor is actually more important because most of our songs are sung. Beautiful melodies, they change periodically. If a new composer comes, you sing that one. But in our case, we didn't have a rabbi, so the cantor had to do both, to be the rabbi and the cantor. And of course, when a boy becomes 13, he becomes a man, bar mitzvah, and he wears a regular prayer shawl. Next. And we got this picture some years ago. This is the destruction of our beautiful synagogue on November 10th. By us, it happened November 10th. My grandfather went to the synagogue to say his morning prayers. He was arrested, saying his prayers, sent to Dachau. The police came to our house, arrested my father, only because he was Jewish. He hadn't done anything. He was a good soldier. I mean, he was a good citizen. And they wanted to burn the synagogue, but there were Christian houses nearby. So they desecrated the whole building. Otherwise, the other houses would have gone up in smoke, totally. And we were very lucky to get this picture. But what's interesting is the bystanders. That is very important today to think back. Who were the people who watched? It's even for us, when we see cruelty being done, are we going to be people who will willingly help, or are we going to be bystanders? And Elie Wiesel, the Nobel Prize winner, says, if you are a bystander, you are equally guilty. Even children, as you can see, were watching as this terrible thing was happening. Of course, I cannot blame that child, but the parents, perhaps. Next. For many years, the synagogue looked like this. I took that picture about 1966, my first trip back. It was used as a storage area for pig food. Now, we're not supposed to eat pork. Neither are the Muslims. That's forbidden by God, actually, and to Abraham, to actually Moses, too. Abraham was the first Jew. But Moses wrote, with the words dictated from God, the Bible, so Old Testament, and that we're not supposed to eat certain things. And it was used for storage. This was a holy place, totally desecrated. Next. Today it has been rebuilt to what it looked like before, except the tablets on top, which have the Ten Commandments in Hebrew letters, are no longer on there. It is a symbol. Once Jewish people lived with us happily. It is used as a building where you have concerts, lectures. I spoke there also many times, not only Jewish, other things in it. It's two of the most beautiful buildings in Kippenheim is the synagogue, which sits smack in the middle of the village. and the City Hall. That also is a very beautiful building, very medieval building. Next. After they came back from Dachau, somehow they permitted those men to come home again. And my father never wanted to leave Germany. He said, look, I'm a German. I fought for this country. I was injured. I almost lost my life. And my grandfather certainly didn't want to leave. But when they came out of Dachau, they permitted at that time most of the men to come home again. In other words, we're going to show them that they leave this country, give them a taste. So when they were there, they had to give up all their clothing and wore those blue and white striped prison uniforms, no underwear, it was bitter cold, stand at attention for hours in the bitter cold. If somebody wanted to blow their nose, they were hosed down with ice cold water. And that happened to my father a few times. They told him, forget about your iron cross. You're nothing, you're a dirty Jew. So when he came home, they both were very broken in spirit and health. And my father said, we must leave Germany. It's important now, we have to get out. But all the doors to the free world were closing very rapidly. We tried to get into America. My mother had already a brother here. And there was a quota system, and we had a number, maybe it would come up in 10 years, something like that. And Brazil had their doors closed. It was all almost futile to try anything, but we still had hopes. Sold the house at a very cheap price, moved into my grandparents' village, even smaller village, about 1,000 people. And my grandparents were the last Jewish family living there. At one time, that village was 40% Jewish. They were required to live separately. A baron permitted them, and he gave them protection, but they had to live in certain streets, like this street was a Jewish street, curled around the bend here. But everybody left, except my branch of the family. They came to America, became quite big in their careers, or they also went to bigger cities to industrialize, Göppingen next door city, except my grandfather, he stayed. And I remember here, the situation was somewhat different. The Christian population, for the most part, treated us with great respect. They were good to us. And I only had Christian friends. And I remember walking up and down this hill, singing the songs of the day, which were many times Nazi songs. We didn't even know what we were singing. And when you turn the corner here, around the last houses, there was a little bakery. And that bakery belonged to Albert Einstein's aunt and uncle. I found that out many years later. Albert used to go there to visit his aunt and uncle. Had I known that when I was growing up, that I had a connection to Albert, he was my hero. And I'm the only child from the whole state of Württemberg, only Jewish child who was sent out to the camps who returned. Not only that, I was becoming a nerdy scientist. I think he would have liked that. And he would have been welcomed me in this home. I know he would have. I missed it. Some things you miss in life. Next. Here's the house my grandparents had, still standing. In fact, I'm going to see it next year. Some new person bought it, gutted it, and it looks from the outside the same way. My grandfather was a cattle dealer. Most of the Jewish people in those villages, this is what they did. They were not allowed to join the unions, so they became either cattle dealers, small-time peddlers, and so forth. Some became doctors, that came later. And the stable was in the house, right here, in the house. He would have like 2 or 3 cows there. I loved that time. It was the only childhood I was allowed to have, maybe 2 or 3 years. Grandpa used to put me on the cows, the smell of it, wonderful, wonderful. In fact, when I was in Montana, I stayed on a ranch, a big ranch, 1,400 cow, Black Angus. And I said, I want to go to the stable. I got to smell that aroma because it brings back happy memories. So here are my grandparents. Next. And my best friend, Elizabeth, Christian girl, she lived across the street. Her mother was my mother's best friend. In fact, somebody just showed me on Facebook. She also is friend with Elizabeth, and they took a picture of her to show me how, I mean, we're good friends. I mean, we telephone each other here and there. Whenever I go there, she's there for me. And of course, the doll is always with me, always. It's like a leitmotif. It's my symbol of life, of when things were really, really still good. She's now, unfortunately, a widow, but our friendship is still as strong. My first ever real girlfriend, I still have her. Next. My grandpa died soon after he came back from Dachau, broken in spirit, and in his heart also was not good. He died in his 60s. He was the last Jewish person to be buried in the Jewish cemetery. And we gave him a special grave, a lying down stone. All the others are erect, because even in those days, they were tumbling the Jewish, desecrating the Jewish cemeteries. We did not want his stone to be tumbled. And thank God nothing happened. It's still there. It's sunk deep into the ground, but you can still see it. And again, you can see I'm wearing my dirndl dress. I'm a typical little German girl. Next. These pictures you're about to see are extremely rare. It's of the deportation of the Jewish people from my home state, Baden. Baden and Württemberg hated each other. Today they are one state. So my mother was born in the state of Württemberg and my father in the state of Baden. So I always said they had a mixed marriage because two different states who hated each other. But today they're together. In the state of Baden, the Jews were deported in October 1940, very early, to a place in France, in the Basque region, near the Spanish border, called Gurs, G-U-R-S. It's a camp you don't know very much about. It's not mentioned too often, but the whole state of the Jewish people were taken in October 1940. We were still safe by then. And somebody found these pictures up in the attic. They are rare, they're precious, because much more is available of Polish Jews, because there were at least 3 million in Poland. In Germany, the whole Jewish population was 500,000. That's it. There weren't millions there, 500,000. Less than 1% were Jewish. And here is some of my family that was deported on that day. Either you belonged in that village to the Auerbacher family or the Wertheimer. So these were the two Jewish families living there. And it was interesting. Again, the bystander. Very interesting picture. The lady's still alive today. And we asked her, what did you think as your friends are being taken away? Well, I just wanted to see. Now in Kippenheim, the situation was not quite as good as in Jegenhausen, where my grandparents lived. You had people hating us. We lived happily together, but there was always a little bit of rumbling. You had to be careful. Now that boy at the end, he's like a second, third cousin of mine. He works today still, he's in his 80s. I just spoke with him, wished him a Happy New Year. We just are celebrating 5,776, our New Year. And he works in the Library of Congress. Next. Here's another relative being deported from my family. They gave them very little time, maybe half an hour, pack up something and you have to go. Give up all your money and you leave. Leave everything behind. Here's another cousin. He didn't make it. The other people did make it. Because the route was Gurs, Rissal, Drancy in Paris, the camp there near Paris, and then Auschwitz. That was the route. Next. And here you see even the people of the village watching, again, the bystanders. Very important to see. It was an agricultural village. You even see the cows standing there. And the old people, they couldn't climb. A disaster. Next. And we know who this man was. And the daughter got out to America. We said, that was your father. And he did not make it, unfortunately. And she said, no, he was an elegant man. He would never travel with a suitcase, just a rope around it. But they had so little time, they just grabbed something and had to go. And unfortunately, he did not make it either. Next. The time is now 1941. Now all the state of Baden was what is called Judenrein, free of Jews. In Württemberg, we were still living. But school had to start. The Jewish children were not allowed to go to the school with the Christian children. I had to have special travel permission papers. I was not allowed to take the bus, so my father took me in the beginning with a bicycle to the train, and he accompanied me. Later on, they had to do some slave labor, and I went all by myself to school. As a 6-year-old on a train. This was the Jewish school. From the whole state, all the Jewish children had to go to this one school. And they had to have a travel permission to even take the train. Next. Here's one of the classrooms, 1 to 4 and 4 to 8. Next. And then it became very critical when in 41, in September, we had to wear the yellow star of David with the word Jude, Jew on it. Everybody from the age of 6 on had to wear that star. Also the women, even before, had to use the name Sarah as a middle name, and the men Israel, to designate them as Jews. Nobody else had to do that. And we had to pay for these stars. They came on a yellow sheet. You cut them out in very bad cloth, and they were sewn on your left side over your heart. This is one that in fact, I brought my star with you today to show you what an authentic one looked like. This is what the star looked like. You can come up later and see it. My mother put a backing on it that you could sew it on. We have a paper that, remember. And you can actually see the stitches on it. We ripped those stars off on May 8th, 1945, when we were liberated by the Russian army. My father said, because I had to go by myself, when I think about it, I see a 6-year-old. I went by myself on the train, wearing that yellow star. So my father said, try to sit in such a way that you can lean against the left window, that you can hide your star, because there were always some boys, girls who would yell at me, you dirty Jew, you know, and bad language. Of course, I was as clean as they, maybe even cleaner. And I remember only one case, one of kindness. And that has to be remembered. The righteous person, to me, are the heroes, the people who care. We're not going to be the bystanders. And a woman came up to me, past my seat as she went out of the train with a little bag, brown paper bag filled with rolls, and walked away. To this day, I have not forgotten that kind lady. She wanted to do something for that Jewish child. And I hope she's watching from the heaven. I know she must be there. And that this little girl never forgot her, and wherever she goes, she talks about her, whether it's Germany or Mexico, wherever I go. I've not forgotten the deed of one of my heroes. There were 2 heroes in my life during that time. The next one will be at the end. You have to wait for that. But that was number 1. She cared. And there were different stars. This was Jude, means Jew. In Hebrew-like letters, there was a Dutch one, Jod, a French one, Juif, means Jew. You were branded. But in my first book, I'm a Star, I turned this negative symbol into something positive, that to me, every human being is a star. You're all stars. You have something to give to this world. You're valuable. You have reason to live. You should be happy. Next. Here's about what I looked like. Everybody from the age of 6 had to wear that star. Next. Next. the transports to the east, we didn't know what it meant. East meant something worse, something to be feared. The first transport from that part of Germany began in 41. Soon after, about 6 months after I was in school, school closed, transports began. We had a number to go, including my grandmother. My father wrote a letter to the secret police, the Gestapo, and that he was a war veteran, wounded, and he had pictures taken of his wounds. He had an injury, left the right shoulder, he couldn't lift his right arm, something like Bob Dole had. Couldn't use his right arm. I think he was right-handed too. Bob Dole, he's still with us. Anyway, and we got out of that transport, but not almost my entire school and my grandmother. And she and everybody else who was on that transport was sent to a place called Riga in Latvia, the capital of Latvia, sent almost immediately to the forest and were shot in the forest, mass graves. I went to that place some years ago. It shook me more so than any other camp, because here was my grandmother, and I should be in one of those mass graves for all intents and purposes. When you walk in, it's a beautiful forest, the birds are chirping, you see a memorial there, and then you walk up a hill. There's one mass grave after another, at least 52, between 50,000 and who knows how many more were shot into those mass graves. Almost all of the kids from my school were there, and of course, other members of my family. And I lucked out at that time. A miracle, many miracles in my life. They took away my grandparents' house. They drove us out. You don't own that house anymore. Leave. And put us into a slum area with other Jewish families. And here still a few little children still alive. And as an example, only one of these children would survive. The one with the striped hat. All these other children were killed eventually. So just a small example. I mean, there were 1.5 million Jewish children killed. Next. Then, a few months later, this was in December. In August, the papers came again. School was closed. I lost in my life 8 years of schooling. I didn't start real school until I was 15. I had a lot of catching up to do, to be in the university, etc. We got the papers again. I have the first page here, which you can see here a little closer. My number was 408. There were more numbers to it, 13-1-408. And the day we are to be deported, and what you can take along. It's a very interesting document, of course, in German. And it says no sharp implements, no knives, no scissors, food for maybe 2 days, and take a bedroll, metal dishes, and that's what you were allowed to take along. Of course, I took my doll. Next. And this is how a transport was put together. We were in the gymnasium, and all the little towns would gather the people, and the big transport was from the capital of Württemberg, Stuttgart. You might have heard about that city. Mercedes is made there, the car. And always a transport had more than 1,000 people. We were about 1,200, close to it. At the end of 3 years, there were 13 survivors out of about 1,200. Everybody got killed or died of malnutrition. And of course, nobody had a camera. You had to give up everything. We had to pay for the transport. They ordered us to pay. And I was the youngest. I was 7 years old. And there were tables set up, just like here. And they said, open everything. And one guy saw I was wearing a little Dutch boy pin. He ripped it off me, and he said in the Swabian dialect, "Du brauchst es nicht, wo du hingehst," meaning, you won't need this where you're going. And then he saw my doll on my arm. He ripped her from me and looked inside a hollow body. I wasn't hiding anything, and I really made up my mind, he's not going to get my doll. He took away everything else, but he's not going to get my doll. And somehow, maybe he had a little humanity, he gave me back my doll. That's why I still had it and bring it to America. Next. Then we were sent to the main gathering place. And actually, the Germans made a film, a video, of my grandmother's transport. But in a few months later, we were there too. In fact, you can see that little video in the Holocaust Museum in Washington. Very rare to see the deportation, about maybe a minute and a half. They wanted to show everything is going well. And here we take them out, it's lying on the floor the same way. And there is a picture, when you look a little bit up, you see the woman bending over. It looks exactly like my grandmother. I can't swear to it. That's her. It could be her last picture, because that was her transport, and only a few months later, we were in the same place. Next. Waiting in mourning for food with our metal dishes before the trains came. Next. Everybody in Germany had an ID. We had a J on it, Jew. And they stamped on it, umgesiedelt, meaning resettled. Sure, we're going into a nice apartment, a nice place. August 22nd, 1942. Now you have people today saying it didn't happen. There is so much evidence available. Only an idiot would say that. Someone said, oh, the ovens in Auschwitz, they bake bread. I do not think you would like to taste any bread from those ovens. I've visited Auschwitz a few times, my camp. In fact, I was there this year with a group. There's so much evidence. How can you say this didn't happen? It's like saying the moon doesn't come up at night or the sun doesn't rise. Obvious. And they had so much evidence that they themselves filmed, and the documents, everything is still there. Next. We were on a regular train, but very crowded. Wasn't a boxcar yet. Very crowded. You couldn't get out. And you had to leave everything behind except your metal dishes. When we arrived in a little town in Czechoslovakia, not today, it's called the Czech Republic. And we had a lot of old people, and they couldn't walk the 2 miles into the camp. They told us, drop everything and march. Next. They were whipping us. Here I'm 7 years old, and my parents tried to protect me. And I had my doll in my arm, and a little duffel bag, and my metal dishes, walking into the camp. Next. And when people say they didn't see anything, I got this from an archive. People took these pictures of us going in, and they never thought, where are they going to? We don't see them again. Next. Going into the camp. And we arrive in a place, an actual little town, a fortress town called Theresienstadt in German, Czech Terezin. It was built by Empress Maria Theresa by her son, Joseph II, in memory of his mother, Maria Theresa. By the way, Maria Theresa was also a very big anti-Semite, but that happened many years before. He built this town as an army garrison town with high brick walls, brick barracks, wooden fences, and barbed wire. So totally sealed off from the outside world. At one time, it housed about 6,000 people. They took them out from there and put in 60,000 at any one time. And Professor Marshall, Dr. Marshall said, before we were 140,000 people from 41 to 45. 2/3 would be shipped out to Auschwitz or other extermination camps. Close to a third died there of malnutrition. At that time, we did not have gas chambers. They were being built, but they were not completed. It was an area just like you keep cattle fenced in until you kill them. You keep them there a while, and then you kill them. Terezin was set up for the intelligentsia of Europe, highly decorated war veterans, artists, the best doctors, the best lawyers. In fact, the man who formulated the Bayer aspirin, the aspirin that you take, he was taken to Terezin. His name was Eichenkreuz, and he survived, luckily. But famous people like that were taken there because they had an idea, well, when the people say, where are these famous people? They say, oh, they're all in this one place, they're doing well. They weren't doing well. I mean, they killed most of them. It was a stop before being killed. Either you died of malnutrition or disease, or you were sent out. And we did not know at that time what Auschwitz meant or any of the other camps. We knew the East. It could be a lot worse. And it was terrible enough there. Totally surrounded by these high walls. Isolated. Next. And here's how we pumped our water from polluted wells. Many people got typhoid fever. And we lived in one of these brick barracks under the roof when we arrived. I had never seen a dead body before, and I remember lying on the barren floor in cement, and there were white sheets all over the place. And I lifted one body. I had never seen a dead body before. I was not even allowed to go to my grandfather's funeral. I was 5 years old at that time. Next. High walls surrounding us. Children always say, well, why didn't you jump down? Well, first of all, the soldiers were marching on them. Secondly, you needed somebody on the outside to help you. You had no money, not a penny. You didn't have good clothing. And to jump down or run out of the camp, it was impossible, almost. A few did make it, and for that we were punished very badly when that happened. Very rarely it happened. Next. When we arrived, there was a scarlet fever epidemic. Thank God we don't have that very much anymore, that sickness, but almost all the children had scarlet fever. I too, after a few weeks, I got it. And we were in a so-called hospital, just 2 rooms set up, and 2 children in every bed. My partner was a baby from Luxembourg, and the bed was always wet, couldn't help it. I had lice in my hair. My body was filled up with boils. I was terribly sick, and we couldn't see our parents. So luckily, just before my 8th birthday, which is December 31, I was allowed to join my parents. Next. And into these rotten houses, real very run-down houses. They had houses plus those big fortresses. And these were for the disabled war veterans, the highly decorated war veterans. And we lived there very crowded, 40 in a room. Maybe a room like that could have maybe 500 people. Double and triple deck bunk beds. And the bathrooms, there were latrines pretty far away. Of course, many of us had dysentery from the bad food and the water. It was very hard to run to the latrine, and there were you could only go out a certain time. Hunger was the main companion. Hunger, mice, fleas, rats, and bedbugs. I was a very good flea catcher. It's not so easy. They jump pretty quick, and I know what bedbugs feel like too. It got so bad that people slept outside because the buildings were so full of vermin. Next. Here's double and triple deck bunk beds. Picture was taken by the Russians after liberation. Nobody had a camera. Next. And also taken after liberation, we pumped our water from polluted wells. You could take maybe 2 showers a year with permission. One room was for the men. And many heads coming down the water, a few minutes, and the women took the children. It was very hard to keep clean. I had lice in my hair. They cut my hair very short. We were not dirty people, but it's impossible to keep clean. Absolutely impossible. Next. And these carts brought the bread ration once a week and took away the bodies. Bread was not really good bread, made of some strange components. My mother would cut a notch Monday to Tuesday, then Wednesday. If you went into next day's portion, you didn't have any bread. Food was very important. Next. And standing on line 3 times a day with your metal dishes, long lines. This was taken again by the Russians. We had a typhus epidemic at the end, so nobody could go home, so we still had to stand on line after liberation. And you had the metal dish. In the morning was like a black liquid they called coffee. It tasted like some disinfectant. We used it to clean our clothes. Lunch was maybe a potato, not a good one. Some turnips. The only vegetable I saw in 3 years were turnips. And a murky looking soup, and that's the same at night. You stood at long lines in winter, in the summer, It was not enough to die, not enough to live. Hunger was the main component of your life. You wanted to eat, constantly being hungry. Next. What did we children do? Well, we were useless to them. We did have some slave labor. I remember there was a group in one barrack, they spliced mica, looks like a stone, that was used for the war effort. I remember once they brought in uniforms, they were sprayed white for the Russian invasion. But children were useless to them. I had a friend, she was a little older, she had to stitch up these bullet holes from the soldiers, the uniforms. That's what was her job. We were useless to them. So what did we do? We played in the garbage dump, hoping to find a little piece from a scrap of, from a potato peeling. You could still cut off a little bit, or a turnip, or rotten turnip, still a piece of string, anything in the garbage dump. Those were our games. Next. My mother worked as a so-called nurse. She was a housewife before, in the old age room for old women. And I remember once I got there, and the women had sticks in their hand. I said, what's going on? Turned out the night before, somebody of these women felt something heavy on the shoulder. She turns around, there's a rat sitting there. It was just vermin, total vermin. Next. The worst day I can remember happened on November 11th, 1943. They said a count out had to be taken. And we all were marched out to this ravine in brochures outside the camp. Whether you were sick, it didn't matter how old you were, you had to go in early in the morning. We stood there and they did count us and they beat us very severely. They knew exactly how many people were there. Most likely they had an idea, perhaps to shoot us on that day, because they were pointing the guns at us. They didn't shoot, but pointing. And it was a rainy day, no bathrooms, no food all day. And very late in the evening, it was closer to 10, 11, whatever it was dark, no bathrooms all day. They sent everybody back. But there was one SS-man who was terrible. His name was Heindel. And he said, men, women, and children separate. We didn't want to do that. We're holding on to each other for dear life. And he beat my mother very badly on that day with rifle butt. And many people died on the field from being beaten, and also many old people, they couldn't stand all these conditions. That was a terrible day. We all thought, this is it. Even my father said to my mother, she was hysterical, said, don't worry, you'll ride in that car again. And she did, and years later, but believe me, it was not a thought in her mind that she would ride in another car. Next. School was absolutely forbidden, but some heroic teachers taught us from memory. I know you've heard about some artists and poems written by the Czech children. In fact, I was here quite a few years ago, and there was a play, I Never Saw Another Butterfly. I spoke when that was done, one of your high schools. And there was a building, a few, with the Czech children. They had it a little better. Germans didn't have that. So I had a little notebook found in the garbage with a few good pages. And I had a stub of a pencil, and one woman, a friend of my mom's, knew a little English. And she taught me this little poem. I wish I were a little bird up in your bright blue sky that sings and flies just where he will. And no one asked me why. He wanted to fly away. And here is, for instance, a little girl had 6 months of schooling. And I think the penmanship is pretty good. I don't do so well today. Next. In 1944, finally, there was International Red Cross inspection. They were sort of, I couldn't say scared into it, pushed into it, because news had leaked out that people were being killed. So they decided to use terrorism as an example to show the International Red Cross, oh, it's okay here, we incarcerated them, but they're living very well. They painted houses and signs to school, to playground. None of these things existed. And they put up a play a little opera for them to entertain them. An orchestra was playing. Only certain areas were shown. And they printed money, bogus money. It's money that you, what is that game? Monopoly, exactly. Monopoly. You can buy anything, maybe some mustard, which made you even more hungry. They even put up a soccer game for them, and some children got sardine sandwiches. One of my friends was one of them, and they ate them down so quickly that they had to replenish them. They were hungry. And they went away saying, yes, it's not so bad here, and they made a film. You can see that film on YouTube. The Führer gives the Jews a city. Still there, all smiling, all bogus. And as soon as they were away, almost the whole camp was taken to Auschwitz, including my very best friend. There were selections, and somehow we were selected to live. We didn't know it at that time, but I am here, and almost all my friends, there was almost nobody left in the camp, just a few thousand people. Everybody was sent out to be killed. Next. What they didn't show them was the crematory, where over 30,000 bodies were burned. They had died. They needed a crematory. So many people died. Next. Finally, on May 8th, 1945, we were liberated by the Russian army, Soviet army, but not before they burned a lot of the papers, all the black piece of paper floating through the air. And I remember I heard noise, the cars were going away, the trucks and everything. And I jumped one of the barricades. By that time, I was 10 years old. And I was kind of a ghetto child by then already, kind of brazen. And I jumped up, and as soon as I jumped up, I heard a tremendous explosion. I thought my head was off. They were throwing hand grenades very near me to try to kill the last people. And I came to my parents. We found a dark hole, a cellar we didn't even know. Somebody had a stump of a candle. And some other people came down. One thing I took with me, not my doll, a prayer book, that my father found in the garbage. It belonged to a former soldier. You know, it was a prayer book a soldier would have, a Jewish prayer book. And I never prayed so hard in my life as I did on that day. We have a Hebrew prayer that I'm sure Jesus said too. The idea that God is one, like you, our Father. And I'm going to sing it too, it takes just a second. It's called the Shema Yisrael, God is one, one is God. The idea of the monotheism of the religion, the first monotheistic religion. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Adonai means the name of God. I shouldn't even use the real name. I should say his name, Ad Hashem Echad, God is one. Never prayed so hard. I never lost faith in God, never. I brought that prayer book with me to America. I still have it. Then, of course, it wasn't like a happy, now we are free. Now we can be happy again. Of course not. Because at that time, just before liberation, they brought in death marches from all these sick people from other camps. Because the Allies were coming very close. They wanted still to kill all the Jews alive in Europe. I mean, the gas chambers were almost finished in our place. And we knew by then that many of our family would not return. So it wasn't like, yay, we are happy. It was a joy, yes, muted joy. And then a bus came from the city of Stuttgart and picked us up, the few survivors. And next, please, I'll make it short. I want to give you a chance. Here's some of the survivors at the end from the death marches. Next. And some, we went back. I give you just a short synopsis of what happened after the war. We stayed in Germany only 9 months. I didn't know what class I should go in. I never finished my first, second, third. So they put me in the 4th and 5th grade. And we stayed only 9 months and came to America. A Jewish organization vouched for us. And God bless President Truman, wherever he is, up there, for giving the permission for us to enter the country. Now, my parents, my mother had a brother in America, Thank you. And he was fighting for the Americans. He was an NCR Casino, 45th Division. My parents got a job. I'll make it very quick because I wrote a whole book which took me 7 years to write. So I'm going to do it in a half a minute. My parents got a job as a couple in this rich house. My mother became a maid, a cook, you know, and my father, butler. And I started to get a very bad cold, which got worse and worse. So the lady said, we have to take her to a doctor. Well, it turned out a girl in the camp, she got a little bit more food. And we were told, don't go near her. She has a bad sickness and you'll catch it. We played with her, but she got a little bit more food, and I prayed to God, I want what she has. Can't be so bad. And you know, you never know what you wish for came true. It was tuberculosis. And they put me immediately in the hospital for 2 years. Total bed rest. Can you imagine? I'm in camp for 3 years. Now I'm in jail again. For 2 years in bed. Can't get off my bed. Can't do what I want. Can't go to school. Finally, after 2 years, my parents took me home. We had a little apartment on the 3rd floor, cold water flat in Brooklyn. Still not well, couldn't go to school. Finally, there was a drug that, when I was near my death, really, that came out, streptomycin, first drug against tuberculosis. I met the man who actually was a co-discovering another book, which would take much longer. Anyway, finally I was okay, and at 15, I entered Bushwick High School in Brooklyn, graduating 3 years instead of 4, because I went to summer school, not because I was a genius, I just worked hard. And I got interested in science at that point, and was quite good at it. And then I started college, Queens College, where Seinfeld went, by the way, and Paul Simon and Garfunkel, they went to that school too. Not with me, later. And I got sick again, and had to leave school again. Stayed in bed another year, and 26 pills a day, and got sick all day, and 2 shots of streptomycin again. But then I went back and finished my degree. I really wanted to become a doctor. I had my acceptance to Heidelberg Medical School, but they were singing some Nazi songs in 1968, believe it or not. It still wasn't gone yet. And I came home, and my mother said, come home. I told you not to go. You don't listen to your mother. So please listen to your mothers. Anyway, I became a chemist, 38 years, researching clinical work, and some years ago I decided to go back. Did I dream all this? And it's just a few more pictures and the story I promised you of my second hero. So I went back. The Russians were still there. I was very close to Prague. In fact, I was there just a few weeks ago. Next, into the gate where originally we went through in 1942. Next, and the house we lived in, very rundown. Now the whole town is being rebuilt. So this house doesn't even exist anymore. I couldn't even recognize it. So this was in the 60s when I went first back. Looked very similar to how I lived there. Next. And the train street from here, the trains went straight to Auschwitz. The tracks were right there. And here was the barrier between their living quarters. You know, they lived very nicely, the people working there from the other side. And here was the separation where the hand grenades were thrown. Next. And the crematory, where the whole thing is now a commemoration place. And here you have a mayor there too. Next. And the 4 ovens. In fact, they say this is one of the best preserved crematory in all of Europe. In fact, Mrs. Bush was there also laying a wreath. Next. And some of the flowers depicting blood. It's much bigger today, it's huge. Next. And I also went back to my mother's hometown and to thank the people, the Christian people who were kind to us. And the last picture, now you have my second hero. Next, is a grave of our beloved Teresa. Teresa was my grandmother's maid for more than 20 years. She was also her good friend. She came in the middle of the night, could have lost her life for that, to save 2 photo albums, our prayer books, and a few little knickknacks. She put them in her basement. I mean, she could have gotten killed for that, really. She took tremendous chances, but she was not going to be a bystander. And when we came back, we said, we want to go to Teresa. They said, Teresa is no longer alive. It happened when the Americans came to that part of Germany. They knocked on the door. She didn't open right away, stayed behind the door. And the soldier shot through the door, instantly killing her. I say, if there's a heaven, there are two women walking hand in hand, a Jewish woman, a Christian woman, forever united, one killed by a Nazi bullet, and the other the product of war. And I'm still very, very good friends with even her great-grandchildren. And that's why you'll have pictures of me as a little girl and my family. Thank you so much for your patience, and I'm sorry not all of you could sit. I know it's uncomfortable. I'm sorry for that. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, I want to give you a little chance. I know I talked a lot. And I talk to everybody on the plane. I talk to people on subways. It's okay. All my friends anyway. No, I never got married. Okay, you have that on your mind. I don't have children. The children of the world are my children. And where I live in Queens is a very multi-ethnic area. Queens is the most multi-ethnic in the whole country. I live in a row house, wall to wall, between a very devout Muslim family from Bangladesh. On the other side is a very religious Hindu family from Guyana, British Guyana. Then comes a Christian house. In 4 houses, we have the 4 religions of the world living very happily together. Wouldn't it be wonderful if the world would be like that? And we're friends. We're great neighbors. We celebrate holidays together. I know a lot about the Hindu religion, the pujas, the weddings. I've been to so many I can't count. And also the burial rites and so forth. We are very good friends. Also with my Muslim friend, Muhammad is a wonderful neighbor. So I always say not all Muslims are terrorists. They are different people too. They're good people. In every group are good people and bad, unfortunately. Now, you have a choice. No question is stupid. It's stupid not to ask. Because we are diminishing. The numbers are, I'm one of the younger ones, the child survivors. I mean, we're the last ones to be still here to tell the story. Because later on, you'll have to read it in books, see movies. You can say, well, it's Hollywood. By the way, Schindler's List is a really good film. I don't think it's just Hollywood. I sat in Schindler's chair, his office. I went to Krakow, and I was in the place where he had the factory. And books, I mean, I hope, I never had a complaint about my books, that I said something wrong. Oh yes, once. I said Elvis Presley, I said the wrong year when Heartbreak Hotel was sung. I had a big breakup with a boyfriend that time, and he just saved my life practically. I love Elvis. I'm going to see Graceland soon. He was my hero, another hero. Okay, please, ask me a question. Somebody start.
I have a microphone if you have a question.
Well, they can say it up loud and they can say. And teachers too, and whoever is here may ask a question. And then later, if you want to look at some of my books, you're welcome to that too. I have to be a salesperson too.
Okay. Ich freue mich sehr, Sie kennenzulernen, Fräulein Auerbacher.
Ja, heute sagt man Frau. Es gibt keine Fräuleins mehr.
Fräulein, Frau.
Okay.
Das ist recht.
Was ist in Deutsch?
Ja, ich spreche Deutsch. My name is Jeffrey McFadden, an Irishman speaking German.
No, you're doing very well. Good accent. Good accent.
I teach history here among those World War II.
Okay.
And I want to thank you profoundly for coming and doing this today, because you are truly, I can't imagine what it would take to relive those memories on a regular basis, and I very much appreciate you doing that. Seeing some of your photographs, especially the deportations, I was wondering if
if you've ever tried to find and perhaps talk to some of those soldiers, if you have ever had success with trying to speak to Germans of that generation, soldiers, party members, are
Not
they
soldiers,
hesitant?
but children. Well, I mean, I meet a lot of people over there.
Yeah.
Some of them had brothers who were pretty big Nazis. Actually, Dr. Mengele comes from, you know, this terrible person who did experiments in Auschwitz. He comes from very near my hometown. His son still lives in Freiburg, which is, what, 20 minutes from my house. He became a lawyer, he changed his name, and the granddaughter was in a class where a friend of mine spoke. Now, do you blame that granddaughter? No. I could embrace her. I could. Not the father, the grandfather, for sure not. Yeah, I do meet a lot of people. I do. And we discuss things, and I didn't meet any former SS, whatever. I have not met that, no. But people like, you know, students here growing up today, we have already now 2 generations afterwards. So those people, and of course they feel guilty. And the first thing I do when I go into assembly room or whatever it is, I said, look, I'm not here to blame you. I'm here to celebrate my life with you. Ich bin nicht hier gekommen, euch zu beschuldigen, sondern mein Leben mit euch zu feiern. Yeah? So that's what it means. And so we are on common ground. Because then they will say, oh, again, we have to hear this, you know. Also for you. Yeah, it happened over 70 years ago. But look what's happening today. How do you know, terrible things are happening again today. That past isn't so far away from us. Have we learned anything? Unfortunately, very little. Unfortunately. Anybody else have a question? Yes, please don't, because I'll continue to talk. I'll make use of those minutes. Anybody have a question? What about forgiveness? Has it crossed your mind? Does she forgive? I know in the Christian faith, you have to forgive, because Jesus died for all sins. Jewish faith, a little different. We're a little different. We just had a wonderful talk in the car with Dr. Marshall. Why we didn't accept Jesus, you know, then we wouldn't have all these troubles. Well, it's not for me to decide that. That's how it was put in the religion, waiting for still the Messiah to come. That's the religion. In the Jewish faith, if it is premeditated murder, and the man or woman shoots that person, only the person who was killed can forgive. Now, of course, it's personal, but I've talked to many rabbis already, and they're very wishy-washy. Forgiveness, this, that. I want a real answer. I don't want wishy-washy business. In fact, right now, the sermon from the rabbi was so wishy-washy. I mean, for me, I'm a scientist. Either it works or it doesn't work. You have to prove it, of course. I don't like wishy-washiness. It can't be red and it can't be blue. No, it can't be only one way. You have to prove it. And it's personal, but that is what we believe in. And no, I will not forgive the people who did that, who killed my grandmother, who killed 13 immediate members, 20 altogether. I cannot. And I'm not such a bad person. I hope I'm not. But it is just, this is something only God can do, I think. God can only say, okay, Mengele, I forgive for all the terrible things you did. It's not for a human being to say that. It is just too deadly and too horrible, what they did. I don't know how you feel about it. I'd like to hear something from you. I know you're going to say, I have to forgive. I wrote a book with a Polish Catholic girl, went with her to Mass every Sunday. Then when I said to her, hey, how about coming with me? He said, well, your services are too long. Yeah, they are. Because everybody in those 6,000 years puts on another prayer. So it gets very long. And the Mass is kind of short. Well, you haven't been around more than about 2,000, but you're there. So when you're 6,000, you will have a Mass longer too. I can say the Our Father, by the way. Yeah. I've been there 4 times. I have been there 4 times, yeah. But you probably will think, why didn't you settle there? Well, we had relatives in America, and my father, certainly it is in our hearts, Israel. You pray to the east every morning. I'm not that religious anymore. Yes, I believe in God. Not as much as I was brought up. We want to either to stay in Germany or perhaps go to America. My father also had 2 sisters married to 2 brothers in Brazil. That didn't work either. But I'm happy to be in America. Yes, I visited Israel 4 times. Oh, I have many movies. I have a few documentary films, quite a few. One is about the doll, the Olympic doll, which can be gotten in Canada. Visual Education Center. I have one about the discovery of streptomycin. I have one, All Jews Out, which was even entered in the Academy Awards. It's my mom and myself vis-a-vis the perpetrators. And we actually found people who worked outside in terrorism for the Nazis. One was a telephone operator, and she had lunch with Eichmann. Now, I saw Eichmann. Eichmann was in charge of the whole Jewish question, the final solution, it's called. Eichmann, you heard, very big killer. There was a major trial in Jerusalem, and he was killed, he was hanged, and they burned him. They didn't want him to become a hero, with the people who liked him. And there is no death sentence in Israel, and that was the only time they used the death sentence. There was a big trial many years ago for Eichmann, but I saw him personally. He was in front of me. Yes, anybody here? Oh, you may ask too. You're not immune. Dr. Marshall, do you have a question?
Oh, I have many, but I know that the books and so.
Okay. All right, if you want to come up, you can see, and God bless you. Have wonderful lives, and remember, you're all stars. All stars. Thank you.
We do have the books up front here if you want to stop by and check out the book.